Buying your first home makes you feel genuine fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of losing money, and fear of taking on a mortgage, just to name a few. Today we're looking at what fears are common, what fears could be getting in your way, and how you can come to terms with your fears to move forward successfully to buy your first home.
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Meighan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit. The disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Some fears can protect us, but some can get in our way. It's really common to be fearful of taking on debt to buy a home. So today we're going to unpack some of those common fears and really look at what they are and whether they're serving us well and how we can overcome them. But before we get into that, in the video behind Meighan every week, there's a special house. What? This is pretty impressive.
And
I think it's familiar.
I reckon you've been in it, possibly
I've
with
been
your
outside it.
prestige clients in Good Deeds. This is Boomerang in Elizabeth Bay, and according to the Australian Financial Review, it was the first house to record an over $1 million sale about 45 years ago. Now, it is no longer the most expensive house in Australia. It was at the time because back then the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge weren't such a feature when it was built. So, when it was built, great place, not so much for a view now. So the new record, fast forward to 2023, the new record for Australia is $130 million. I'm going to share more of these record-breaking houses over the coming weeks.
Of course, we're not actually suggesting you need to worry about $130 million houses. We know that you as first home buyers, you think, what the hell? I just want something for $800,000 or something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, but you're not going to get excited if I put an $800,000 house behind me.
That's true. Unless you're about to move into it. We are so pleased today to welcome Aaron and David from Atelier Wealth to talk about how they work through a process with their clients they call fear setting. So welcome, guys.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to have us on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Fabulous. Now, fear is, of course, an emotional response to a threat, whether it's real or imagined. We still can have that emotional response. So let's start at the top. What are some of the common fears that you see that borrowers have, particularly first-time buyers?
Yeah, going through the process, I call it the client experience, for example. It brings out, I think, people's most intimate fears around home buying. And I think getting a loan is probably the hardest hurdle mentally for people to break through. I think there's a fear the bank is going to say no, for example, and that's a massive fear or showstopper. The other one is the market, fear of not getting into the market. And then when they're going to buy the property and when they've found the one, fear they're not going to be able to actually pull the trigger and make it theirs as well. And I've kind of put 3 there, but there's so many that sit underneath that as well that we'll unpack together. But I feel like as people go through this journey, because it's all unknown territory for them, so every new milestone that they're hitting is just bringing out the worst case scenarios in their mind.
Yeah. Mind's a powerful place, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and buying property is stressful, let's face it. So I guess if you're under stress and then your mind will go to the fears at whatever's appropriate or whatever is relevant at that time. But one thing, Aaron, that a lot of first-time buyers that I've spoken to, they also tell us they have a fear of the debt, fear of actually having a mortgage. And you know, and there's that talk about what the fears are underneath that too, in terms of the layers of having to pay it back every month, what if interest rates rise, having a debt over your head for 30 years, for God's sake. There's all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But just the size of it, because it's the most amount of money that we've ever looked at, you know, ever in our lives the first time we buy a property. It's like, you're kidding me, I'm going to have a mortgage of $500,000 or more? You know, it's just insane. It's a bit like boiling a frog, right? It's sort of over time, it doesn't feel like it's that bad, but before you commit to it, it's pretty mind-blowing. So tell us, can you share with us because, you know, you have you call it fear setting process, don't you? You actually have a term for this. So we'd love to hear more about what that means. Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, look, I feel like buying a home holds up the greatest fears. It's going to mirror to your fears that you're going to go through. Like what you said there, this giant mortgage isn't going to impact my lifestyle. That's probably one of the big ones. Am I going to be house poor? So I'm going to have the property, but am I going to be eating 2-minute noodles? Now I'm shackled to my job because now I've got to pay this giant mortgage as well. What happens if I'm in a job that I don't like? Or what happens if I might lose my job as well? Then what happens? And you can just start to see we're cascading down this like downward spiral going, it's one thing after the other. And imagine when you get a couple, now we're compounding that as well, because they might be playing off each other's couples' intimate fears and what they've grown up with their parents or what their families experience with money, debt, and their own property journey as well. So this can start to bring out to the surface fears that people didn't even know existed. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is let's just put this out on a page. Let's get these out. And so we're getting clients to kind of download, and we're saying, heard that before, I've heard that before, I've heard that before. We're not being flippant, but what I feel is that we're just taking that on to go, what you're experiencing is very, very common. This is part of this process. But the flip side to it is so many people have bought. So they've found a way to build a bridge and address these fears and subsequently move through it as well. But nothing will change unless you change as well.
How do you start that process of uncovering their fears? Because I'd imagine that some people, and certainly from a psychological point of view, a lot of people don't even know what their fears are until they're faced with them.
Yeah.
Or they're kind of brought to the surface by an event.
I think, well, they come to the front pretty quickly in times like this. So whether it's buying a property, it's such a highly emotional experience for the first time. And if you've never done it before, and I purchased recently for the first time.
Congratulations.
And I've been working with Aaron for 7 years. So I've been dealing with a lot of settlements and understanding how the process works. And even then the emotions that came with that purchase for me, I have a lot of empathy for first-time buyers and just buyers in general, but they just come to the front because the emotions are so strong, especially during that process. And unless you've got trusted people around you, whether it's the broker, buyer's agent, your conveyancer, they can really bubble away, and then they can get irrational as well. And you've got to really put a pin on it pretty quickly and say, guys, like Aaron said, it's not the first time someone's bought a house. Here's a clear process to follow and handhold all the way.
Now, you mentioned they can get irrational. We know that. We know that just from our own observation. We also know that through our buyer's agency businesses, actually dealing with people who have been irrational for a period of time and then come to us for help, or even when they're irrational when we're helping them, like it is. And we feel it ourselves. And when we've been buying property, we know what we're doing. We know the market. We understand all of this, and yet we still feel that pull ourselves. So we know how easy it is to feel irrational. It's really that where you give into those irrational fears and either jump in and make a big mistake or don't do anything. And I guess that they're the two big dangers, aren't they? That sort of this FOMO is a classic example of an irrational fear driving decisions, that one in the cool, calm light of the aftermath of it, when you're no longer feeling that panic, you go, oh, is that really the best option that I could have taken? wasn't really the only option, like often we think when we're under stress. Or alternatively, people who sit on their hands for years, and we've had people both in our businesses and also in the course that have done your First Home Buyer Guide course who have been vacillating and arguing, fighting the market for years, and then finally just decided to take a chill pill and learn the process and then actually move forward with more, I guess, more confidence. And so that's an example of somebody that actually finally did move on. But how many times have we come across people that have sat on their hands for years and the market's moved on and they've either been priced out of it or they've had to buy a lot less than they could have afforded, say, 4 years earlier, or they had to buy in a really different area because they could no longer afford where they originally wanted to buy. Do you come across that a lot? And I guess, in your sort of fear setting process, I guess, do you have any examples of where you're seeing that inaction, where people have cost themselves because of that, and also when they've taken, a more proactive or positive approach and circumvented or changed the way that their behaviour and had a different outcome?
You're spot on. And the cost of inaction, when you talk about a median increase in property values, say in Sydney, for example, you'd have to be saving $2,000 a week just to keep up with the average increase in house prices, property prices. You're not
over what period of time?
Can you just back up the truck a little bit? Did everybody hear that? That's a stat that we haven't ever looked at or examined. Talk us through that, because it's important.
The market is moving with or without you, and that's obviously the biggest challenge for property buyers to get in. It's waiting for no one. 13 rate rises and property prices increased by 9% on average around the country last year. It's not waiting for anyone. It's not waiting for the perfect time. So when we talk about the cost of inaction, when you talk about that 9% increase in Sydney, for example, on median house price, the property value, what that's had to do is you've had to save the equivalent of $2,000 to keep up with that capital growth increase.
Wow.
A week or a month?
Per week.
$2,000 a week?
Yeah.
Over what period?
I'll find you the chart and send it through to you so you can include it in the show notes.
Please.
If you think about $1 million property, 10% growth, that's $100,000. Yeah, two grand per week, 2 times 52, that's $100,000.
And so you're paying rent, and then you're
just doing all the maths in our head at the moment, because we talk about this and we talk about the cost of inaction, but we've actually not sat down and thought about what that actually equates to a week.
Dollar value of inaction.
When people are trying to save the market, or they're talking about, I just need to wait another 6 months, and that might cost you $50,000, but how much is that a week?
Yeah. $50,000. And then you got to think, during that time I've had rate rises, which is reducing your borrowing capacity as well. So it's just compounding. You're missing out, and eventually you buy less property. And to your point, Veronica, you have to compromise on the location. You have to compromise on the type of property. Maybe it's the style, the specs. It's not a 4-bedroom, it's a 3-bed or 1 bath. That needs a lot of work. Now we're dipping in more cash. Maybe we're going to outgrow that property. We have a second or third child. We now need to sell that and upgrade. And what happens when we've got more kids? Less borrowing capacity. While someone's on part-time work, for example, the stars are never going to align. So to go back again upstream to around fear setting, when we're talking about taking on this loan, when I'm talking to double income, no kids, I'm saying your borrowing capacity is amongst its strongest right here, right now. Take off maybe a little bit more than you feel like you can chew. The bank is going to do the stress testing around your living expenses. They're going to add the buffer on the servicing, for example. The bank will do that stress testing. People then double dipping on their stress testing and then becoming even more conservative. We're saying, look, you may feel like you're stretching yourself. And Damien and Lily are a very good example. Double income, no kids. At some point, they may think to start a family. But right here, right now, over the next few years, their incomes are going to grow. They're young, they're educated, they've got the ability to put their foot down on the pedal for income and earning potential. Use this time to your advantage.
Thank you, Aaron.
Fine. Am I saying that you're on a rise, am I?
All compliments.
It's interesting. It reminds me, there was actually Stuart Weems had an episode on his Investopoly podcast which went through the phases of life and very much talked about that, the times where you are able to access cash flow and investment versus when you can't. And what you're talking about there is where a lot of first home buyers, a lot of people that listen to this podcast have already got kids. So you're going to be in a different situation to somebody who is able to push themselves because they've got all that earning capacity and a bit of a runway ahead of them before having kids. Now, obviously, And you know, I was listening to another money podcast with women hosts and young women in their 20s, and one of them was talking about how she'd bought this investment property because she was able to save up this money over COVID, and how, despite the fact she'd been given this advice to really stretch herself now while she can, she went the safe option. And when she described the type of property she bought, I honestly wanted to cry, because, you know, a one-bedroom apartment in an area where there's lots and lots of other one-bedroom apartments, there's very little capital growth in that type of asset, but also there's very little opportunity for her to grow in terms of her life stages. And I know this from experience because my first property was way too small. It was too small for me within the first year of owning it. So I know this from my own personal experience a long, long time ago. And there's a lot of popular advice around there as to don't push yourself. And so there are consequences for not pushing yourself when you can, because I think what you're alluding to, and perhaps you can tell us a bit more about the consequences of being at a later stage in your life when you're not able to push yourself, or you're still pushing yourself, but you are constrained because, you know, you might be taking time off to have kids or whatever, or just the very fact that kids do cost a lot of money and you need more space and all these sorts of things. And so I guess this idea of fear setting and really tackling what is it you're really fearful of early on is particularly critical when you're thinking about that.
Right. I think we're projecting, and Damien touched on the team. So you got your mortgage broker, hopefully a buyer's agent, and a conveyancer.
Yep.
And the conveyancer can project a lot of fear sometimes. That comes from, I guess, trying to minimize risk. Like, don't buy that on condition.
And this is not a bad thing. We're not suggesting that you shouldn't have fear, and we want to address this in a minute.
Yeah. There's the good
fear is
to be
that can actually
of.
be productive.
There's things that you don't know, and that people like yourselves have experienced and have been there, have done that. We've given multiple clients dodging bullets, and there's things like there's inexperience, fear. So professionals that have inexperience will then project their own fears and insecurities, which we see that becoming a challenge. I think parents as well have a big role to play. I hope we open this Pandora's box, and I'll give you one example.
Go.
Say this because Damien is my brother-in-law, so his parents are my in-laws. But when Damien was looking initially, his parents were like, "That's a lot of money," and I had to say, "It is for you guys, but in this market, it's a very different property market to when you guys bought, respectfully, 20 odd years ago, right, Damien?"
Well, 20 odd years ago, they bought on the south coast of New South Wales in the 90s. I was looking to buy in Sydney last year.
Yeah. And those biases that they have are often not helpful at all.
No,
not at all. You know, buying in the south coast, you're buying a fully detached house, a quarter-acre block. That's a pretty standard buy, even for a first-home buyer. Buying in Sydney as a first-home buyer, it's an apartment, it's a villa, and that's what you're going to hope for. It's a stepping stone. You're right.
Yeah.
And when the parents then project that it's a lot of money, then that can feed into the kids, and especially if you maybe have the bank of mum and dad involved, because now the parents actually have a say. And when the parents are projecting that fear or that insecurity, naturally it comes from a place of love, but then it can also have a bit of an impact on the kids who are trying to buy and get into the market as well. Going, if my parents think it's a lot of money, that is a lot of money, then what do? I dial down my budget and I compromise the type of property that I'm looking to buy.
Yeah. Often the parents were buying in a different life stage as well. Sometimes now we're more establishing our careers and partnering up or buying as a single. Whereas, and as you alluded to, or you actually stated earlier, your borrowing capacity is at its best before you have children. Sometimes our parents were buying when they already had the children, but they might have been working several jobs. I just want to go back to the point that Veronica made we about the Stuart Wims podcast. We actually pulled that life stages apart in an episode 125 some time ago. So go back to that one and have a look at life stages, because it really does matter which life stage you're in and which one you're going into next, and it will affect what your borrowing capacity is. Because when your kids are young, you might have less ability to make mortgage repayments or lower income, and that affects the borrowing capacity. Before you have those kids is the best time to be looking at that. When they're in high school and you've got potentially private school fees, that's a whole different kettle of fish. So having a look at those life phases and check out podcast 125 will really help.
Absolutely.
Very true.
Yeah, true.
So, Aaron,
It's really hard sometimes to get
We've got 4 people here trying to, and we're all being very polite. We're not talking.
I was waiting to get that in for about 4 minutes.
We're not talking over each other. We're being so polite. So there's awkward gaps every now and then.
I had to keep that in because it's relevant.
It's funny.
If in the wrong place.
We like reality on this podcast. So, Damien, you do most of the first home buyer work, within your business there. And Aaron, you're the sort of, you're the writer. You're the one who writes all the books, right?
Correct.
So you're dealing with first home buyers face to face, and obviously yourself, you've only recently been a first home buyer yourself. So you've got that personal understanding of these fears that people deal with. So in the process of working with clients where you're working through that and uncovering those fears, the fears that they may not even realize they have, I think what you drew out earlier, talking about if they're a couple, one may have one set of fears and another a completely different set of fears. And that's often to do with people's money stories as well, isn't it? And their money types or their, and the homes that they've been brought up in. How do you go, what sort of process do you go through to actually get them, apart from just saying, yeah, you are not unique. You think you are, but everyone goes through this to some degree. What process do you need to go through with them to really get them addressing it in a way that they actually settle down and they're okay to move forward, feel the fear and do it anyway?
Yeah, I feel like there's a few different, everyone's going to have a different way of approaching it. Aaron's a bit more direct with our clients. I probably take the role of being nearly an armchair psychologist. I let them work through their fears. So when a first-time buyer comes to me and you can tell whether they're going to buy or not within the first pre-approval, or whether it's going to take 4 pre-approvals to actually secure the property. If it's the latter, you really just have to let them understand how the system works. And they do get beaten down by the system, and at some point they'll pull the trigger and make a decision. But I'm just there to be that gentle voice, just reassuring them that what they're going through is pretty standard. I don't like to push them into anything. I let them come to their own conclusions. But in markets, because we're in Wollongong, we've got an office in Sydney, one of the most competitive property markets in the world now, it very quickly comes to the front that what they're doing or what they want to do isn't going to work. And it's just there when they realize that, they come for advice, that's when we can push them in the right direction.
Got it. So let's talk about some of the fears that actually service first home buyers well. We talk about fear is actually it's a protective mechanism, right? There are times when we fear things that really we get in our own way, and there are other times we fear things for a bloody good reason. And when it comes to property in particular, there are huge risks around property. And there's obviously risk in borrowing as well. So Meighan and I can talk to the risks in the property, which we will get to in a sec. But what are some of the risks in borrowing that people do need to have a healthy fear of? And so, and this is about healthy fear, not a destructive fear.
Yeah, I'll start with one. So when we're using, say, the bank of mum and dad, and the parents may have a fear around if I'm going to give the kids cash, which this is probably one of the biggest issues that we typically see, is a non-refundable gift, always a cash advance. Is it an interest-free loan? Is it repayable? Are you going to sign a stat dec, or are we going to go down the path of a guarantor loan? So it's family and money. So we want to be very, very clear. What's the rules of engagement when it comes to family and money? And again, the parents have their own set of fears. They've heard horror stories. Thanks very much to Current Affair and Today Tonight for just making guarantor loans infinitely much harder than they need to be. But again, there's some element of fear, but also risk. Okay, great. How do we address that risk? You have to see a financial planner because there's all new debt that you're taking on. You can't jeopardize your parents' property. Okay, great. Up your insurances, your personal insurances to cover the extra debt you're taking on. That is a no-brainer. Yeah, so there's the fear there. Then there's a way to mitigate it. Then there's a way to take some action around it.
Yeah.
We kind of follow that as and this is all born off the back of Tim Ferriss's TED Talk. So again, if you want to include that, that's where I've literally pulled this out from when we've done fear setting within our team or with our clients as well. So you define the fear, you talk about how you're going to prevent the fear, and then you talk about how you're going to repair the fear. And so I'll just build off that example. Let's say my fear is job loss of income from being made redundant. What do I do? Because then I've got mortgage repayments to make. Okay, that's the fear. I can prevent it by having 3 months worth of, say, mortgage repayments or living expenses, call it 3 or 6 months as a rule. That's what I can do.
That's your buffer.
That's your buffer.
That's your buffer or your war chest.
Yeah, your buckets, however you want to call it. I could repair that by always having a constant stream of meetings with recruiters. I know that I could talent stack my resume, that if I was to go out to market, I'm pretty employable as well. And so there's ways that, or worst case scenario, I go and drive Uber or stack shelves to make sure that I would make my mortgage repayments, or I could call the bank and ask for hardship.
Right. Contingency planning.
Absolutely. And so we've addressed the fear, we've spoken about it, and we've found ways to mitigate it. And again, this conversation where as a couple, this may start to come out when you're going through, or even as an individual, it's just going to start to percolate in your head. Do this exercise, write it all down, and you'll start to see that, okay, there is a rational way of maybe addressing or meeting some of these fears.
So it starts with articulating it, doesn't it? Yeah. And I guess that's what you're saying earlier on. It's fear setting, is uncovering it, it's getting it out there. So there's some. I mean, they are some fears that we hear people talk about. So certainly, and with good reason. I think, if you're getting money from mum and dad, you need to be super clear on all those sorts of things, and
good
also
written agreements.
Yes, and fully clear as to what the expectations are, and likewise, yes, you're taking on a huge debt and you're thinking, Jesus, what's going to happen if I do lose my job, or if interest rates keep rising or whatever. So it is about, having that out there, understanding what that will mean, and then how that works for you and how you can prepare for it. And then if it doesn't happen, yay, that money's sitting in your offset and saving your money. Presumably, depending on how you set yourself up. So on the flip side, though, and this is one thing that Meighan and I are great pains to let anyone who's listened to this podcast will already know this, and we talk about buying the right property and understanding what's a good asset versus what's a poor asset. And there's a lot of fear that drives people to buy really poor assets. I mentioned that example before. I was listening to that podcast, and that woman bought a one-bedroom apartment in an area with lots of one-bedroom apartments because it felt safe and it felt like a lesser amount of money, and her debt was smaller, and she felt safer about that. Long term, that is not going to work for her as hard as if she'd stretched herself and bought a better asset somewhere else. And we are at great pains to help first home buyers understand there's choices in terms of what you borrow money for and what you buy when you're buying property. One of our Home Buyer Academy principles is, if it's easy to buy, it's hard to sell. And why that's important is because capital growth all comes down to whether you can find a buyer for it down the track when you want to sell it and upgrade or do whatever you want to do, right? And if you can't find that buyer who's prepared to compete for it and pay more than you paid for it, then you've sort of done yourself out of something very, very important in life, and that is capital growth. So anyway, I can rabbit on for hours about this, but this is one of the risks we're talking about here, that we're not certainly suggesting to people just get over your fear and buy your first home. It's about get over your fear, get some really good advice around how you can mitigate those fears and buy a good asset.
Absolutely. And I think we, as human beings, if someone else can do it, so can I. So we need someone in
It's that aspirational idea.
We need someone in our circle. So imagine if and misery loves company, and the same could almost be said for fear. It can really hold us down. Yeah. So if no one in our peer group is buying and we're all going, the market's out of reach, the market's unaffordable, and there's a bit of an echo chamber here, we're going to get stuck in this rhetoric. We need to kind of break away from the herd a little bit, which is tough to do. Find people that have been there, done that. We always say success leaves clues. So find the people. This podcast is a great example of, here's people that have been there, done that, helping numerous people, sharing the insights and the knowledge. If you can fill your cup up with this type of information, find a team around you that's going to be there to lift you up, because you will only rise to the caliber of your team as well. People that can enable you and help you on that growth journey. You will come out bigger and better. And I say that the property market only rewards action takers and decision makers. So at some point, that fear needs to convert itself into making some decisions and taking some action.
So
And
true.
education is a big part of that. We talk about having that team as the very first step. Your support crew is the very first step out of the 10 steps that we teach people on how to purchase a property, taking each step in the right order. So the support crew is very important, but it is equally as important to make sure that you're getting the advice from the right people. There is so much noise in the property education space that comes from people that have an agenda, that have an ulterior motive, whether that is that we want to educate you how to buy a house, but at the end of the day, it's just about how to buy a house and land, or how a developer is selling an off the plan. So really important that people have that ability to discern between where they get their information from and who is quality when it comes to having a support crew around you, because people feel very successful when they've purchased something because they've become a homeowner. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, as Veronica said, it's a good asset, or that it's going to set them up for their future stepping stones if this is the first step on the ladder.
Right. And can I just say, there's a feeling, especially with broking, I mean, we live in a numbers world, Damien and I, our team. So it's very, I guess, is that left brain that's analytical?
The non-creative one.
The non-creative side. So it can feel like your broking can be a little bit low in emotional intelligence, when this is a very high emotional journey, because we're doing numbers. We can lose a little bit of that skill set, which is the emotional intelligence side, which I always tell the team, I'm like, this is an emotional journey, not a numbers journey as well. But the other part I really feel is we're privileged to get a mortgage in this country. We're privileged to go to buy property in this country. If we can kind of flip it on its head a little bit, again, that whole fear thing about getting a loan, to be able to get a mortgage, it means the bank thinks you're credit worthy. It means you'll be able to find a property to get a loan, because there's no loan without a home. It just shows you, like, the great Australian dream is not dead. It just has changed and morphed a little bit to be circa 2024's version of it as well.
It's a good point, and it's funny. In some ways, I feel like doing a flashback episode to the 90s, because that's when I bought my first property. And it was hard, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And we can wax lyrical about our journeys and how we got into the market, and make it sound easy in many ways, because you would talk with, we talk with humor about our mistakes, and we look back, and everything seems easier when you're reflecting back on it. Everything does. For those women who've had children, think about childbirth. It's never that bad when you're telling the story afterwards, right? During it, So the thing is with buying property, that every single generation has its challenges. And to sort of, and there's a lot of rhetoric out there which is about that sort of, it's fear-based rhetoric, and it's sort of victimhood. It's like looking back going, well, it was easier for you boomers and Gen Xers, and for us it's really hard, it's impossible. And there's a lot of media around it. Now, I'm not saying it's not easy. I'm not saying it's not difficult. I'm not saying it's not challenging. But, we've interviewed a number of first-home buyers on this podcast who found a way to get around it, found a way to actually succeed in the market, work with it, stop fighting it. And this is really an important message, because you can spend a lot of time in that fear space where woe is me, it's the world's against me, look at, affordability, woe. Once again, not detracting from that, but don't let that stop you. Find a way to work with, what the opportunities are out there, and do something about it. We've got so many people that have done our course and have become homeowners and never thought they would have been. It's a wonderful thing. And working with people such as yourselves, working with brokers who can actually guide them through that process, and other experts, that's what gets you there, So, and there was no mortgage brokers around when I bought my first property. There were no buyer's agents around. There was no course of first home buyers. It was harder.
It was very limited internet when we were buying our first homes too, Veronica, let's be honest.
I don't think it existed, did it?
It was the Saturday papers, and you went through
it was the Saturday paper and the yellow pages.
You waited for the sold results on a Sunday after the Sunday Telegraph. They pulled them out.
That's right. And they're all in abbreviations.
And we think it was hard then. It's hard now. It's only going to get harder in the future. It's going to get more competitive.
Just different difficulties.
The bank policies will change. Like, it'll just get harder to get a mortgage, for example. There'll be more competition because there's more migration coming into the country. Like, you can just continue to see, like, the longer you wait, and if you're able to do so now, the longer you wait, it's to your own detriment. And yes, you need to go on this journey. And that's what, again, we'll circle right back to the very start around fear. if you can find a way to release the fears, address the fears, and acknowledge that, and then a way to let it go and say, I'm going to let this experience kind of take me where it needs to. Find enablers, listen to the podcast. Again, we'll talk about Fill Your Cup, but buying is a mindset. And whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And so if you kind of get yourself into buyer mode, mindset, surround yourself with people that have been doing it. So many people that have done it will just tell you, like, I will help you get there. And buyer's agents are the best example of that. I will help you get there. It's an insurance policy to make sure that you actually buy smartly.
I'm going to put a little caveat in there as well. Not all buyer's agents are able to do that. Unfortunately, there is a very low barrier to entry out there at the moment for buyer's agents. So if you are going to use a buyer's agent, and we know, and look, your first home buyer guide is a course that we've put together because we're buyer's agents, and we've put it together for people who can't afford a buyer's agent. But if you are one of those people that can afford a buyer's agent, be very, very careful to get one who has got longevity in the marketplace and ideally 10 years experience, because you want to see them go through up cycles and down cycles. You want to work with a local specialist, somebody who absolutely knows that market inside out and can absolutely give you full on insights into what's a good property to buy and what's one to leave alone. And thirdly, you want one with a rigorous due diligence process. Now, I make a little personal sport of checking out the websites of new buyer's agents. And I'm telling you right now, when you look at their process, because most of them stick their process on there, if they don't have anything mentioning due diligence, with hell of a lot of them don't, because when you do a licensing course, it doesn't teach them due diligence. Do you really want a buyer's agent who knows less about due diligence than you would if you did our course? No, you do not. So just be very careful. Look for those three things: experience, long experience, local experience, and due diligence. And you are 50% of the way there in getting a good buyer's agent.
And with
another gap.
Another gap. I just realised some of this conversation, we're all coming to realisations about a few things, and then we're going, yeah. But the question isn't following, which is quite hilarious because normally it just does.
Normally we're falling over each other to talk.
You can hear us thinking.
We're going,
yeah.
This has been really exciting for me because, like, I did a psychology degree, so I'm very interested in how the human brain works, but also human behaviour. So my interest, particularly in the property industry, has always been around how human behaviour interacts and how people think about things and how they process things. My takeaway from talking to you guys is you've got an incredibly high level of emotional intelligence, which is really quite refreshing and enjoyable to listen to. But you're looking at things from the point of view is it's not just about the numbers. And I have done business with people that it has been all about the numbers and helping them to understand that emotions are drivers of behaviour that affects property prices and decisions is really important. And when you break it down to an individual level, as you are with your buyers, with the fear setting side of things, it is almost like a life skill that people can bring into their own relationships, their personal relationships, their business relationships. Because what's one thing that people often do? It's that they put off the thing that's the hardest because they fear what has been created in their own mind of how someone else is going to respond to them. And we've got a saying in our office, and it's eat that frog. You know, you walk in the morning, get that thing done that you are most fearful of, and then it's done for the day. And probably what you thought was going to happen isn't going to happen. So the idea of actually being able to really identify your fears, work through them, and have strategies to manage doesn't mean that you're pushing them aside and saying, I'll just pretend it doesn't exist. It's actually embracing them and saying, this is real and that's okay, but this is how I can manage it. And I can move forward and I can be a homeowner, but I can do it with a level of control.
Yeah, Meighan,
I love it.
This whole buyer psychology, this is what we focus on this as a team. We got the whole team to read The Psychology of Money recently, which I think is like a must read.
Yeah.
And going on any journey, whether it's investing or buying their own home as well. But there's one point that I feel like has very little, has raised very little when people go for a loan. And like, there's this feeling that once you turn that key and you walk into your own home, I wish someone told me this feeling years ago, like years and years ago. And I tell this to a lot of our buyers now. When you walk in and no one is going to increase the rent, when you walk in and you've got no worries about spilling red wine and losing a bond or a pet, for example, or having to move and pack up again because the landlord wants to renovate the property and then again is going to subsequently increase the rent. I just wish, because I went down a reinvesting path, I wish someone told me that earlier. And when my friends and family come over, I feel like they're more comfortable instead of it being our rental, is our home. Don't you reckon, Damien?
Definitely, 100%. You told me about that. Like I said, I've settled in January. So that feeling of walking through the door for the first time, and yeah, it was all mine. It really felt wonderful. And it's even, I think, the added responsibility to it as well. I think personally, when you take on a responsibility, it gives you freedom in life. And the responsibility of owning your own home, taking on that risk, it gives you a greater purpose. And yeah, when I walked in and I scuffed the wall and I thought, oh, the landlord's not going to come and save me. There was a moment of 10, 11 years of renting. I thought, oh no, that's for me to go down to Bunnings and paint. But hey, that gave me a lot of purpose that day. And yeah, it definitely does.
That's a classic. I love that. One of the questions that we ask all guests, which you've just answered, is what is the one thing you know now that you wish you knew as a first home buyer? And Aaron, that's really interesting that you mentioned that you went down the rent vesting path, because we've got an episode coming up about rent vesting, pros and cons, because that's interesting. We hadn't thought of that as a pro for not rent vesting or a con for rent vesting. So we might add that into our... We'll remind you all, listeners, when we get to that episode of that.
I'll tell you just a major con is when your wife is 8 months pregnant and then you get noticed to leave the property. That will go down well, and that was the final straw. I was like, nah, never again will someone dictate to me when and where I leave and what those terms are like. And I think it took that moment in life for us to realize, no, we're starting a family. We want to put down roots. We want our own home. At that stage, obviously, a mum wants to nest as well. And as a father, I want security and stability for my family. So I'm like, rent investing got us to that point. I was not going to get us to the next stage in life. And that's where we really wanted to put down roots and have that security and stability.
Fantastic.
Fabulous.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming along. It's been
enjoyable.
A really good
Very
chat.
Thought-provoking.
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. I think when we kind of plug in, it's not about LVRs. It's not about loans and rates and repayments. This is much bigger picture. And that's why I think where we get a real kick out of this, knowing the conversation about, is it weekly or monthly repayments? That's a given on what we do. But where we really want to take the journey is the emotional side.
Yeah. And helping them secure that property. Yeah, it's about the property.
We often talk about property therapy in my buyer's agency business. I think Meighan does a similar thing with her clients.
We do a lot of counselling with clients.
Yeah. Property therapy. So it sounds like you do very similar, similar approach.
Very much
money therapy. Yeah.
Now, quick note: you may think that we cover everything you need to know in these podcasts. A word of warning: we do not. We just scratch the surface here. And if you really want to be an educated first home buyer, you really need to learn about all the steps to do and how to do everything in the right order.
Yeah, our first home buyer guide course only costs $990 and you get direct access to us to help guide you through negotiations. Trust me, you'll overpay by a lot more than $1,000 if you don't know what you're doing.
You will. And, we had a request from somebody who did our free mini course on how to price a property. Then they wanted us to give them some free advice. And we went, you know what? You can just buy the course for $990 because I charge $595 an hour. So you get a bargain if you get the course. That's less than 2 hours of our time.
Well, they get an hour of our time on Wednesday. Every Wednesday. Directly. Bargain. All right. Thanks, guys. Really, really enjoyed chatting to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out your first home buyer guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.